Yeah, now it's standby, going live.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are back. Welcome back, everyone, after lunch networking session. And we have a keynote speech now on the topic digital health and generics and biosimilars business. So for this, I have great pleasure in introducing Erez Hybloom, who is joining today from Tel Aviv, Israel. Erez in the past has managed global specialty product portfolio for Teva, and Erez has extensive experience in portfolio selection and prioritization processes, end-to-end operations management, manufacturing operations, product launch management, and supply chain management. Today, Erez is an independent consultant for startups and pharmaceutical companies, and also the CEO and founder of a digital startup. So, Erez, looking forward to hearing your thoughts and presentation. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Samir. It's a pleasure to meet you again, even though it's virtually and far away. And it's a pleasure to be here today. It's a whole new world, and giving this presentation is always a challenge. In the past, we used to think that going face-to-face in front of an audience is hard, but going in front of a computer and not seeing the audience is even harder, as we see every time I give these presentations. It's always a challenging.
We are feeling like the soccer players who are playing in the soccer match, but there are no spectators, right?
Exactly. It's quite an interesting, and you don't get used to it. I think I've been giving these lectures throughout the year, and it's you don't get used to the fact that you're looking at yourself in the presentation. So thank you for the time, and I hope it will be interesting. And if there's any questions, and of course there's the chat, and you will stop me if something is interesting that comes up.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I have a presentation which I'm going to present, and eventually during that I'm going to touch a bit about digital health, and I'm going to talk about the connection to pharmaceuticals and generics and biosimilars. Any questions, feel free to ask, and of course afterwards we can have a discussion and go deep dive into whatever is interesting to the audience. As Samir mentioned, I have a very long experience in pharmaceuticals, but also in the digital area. I've been working on that for the last few years. This is something that is personally close to my heart, following up on it and involved in many things. And I also have the liberty of living in Tel Aviv right now after living in Europe. And the good thing about that is that I can give some relevant examples, because the COVID-19 gave us some opportunities to rethink about how we treat medications and how we share information, also the challenges that basically the entire humankind and humanity have in regarding to that. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more and give some fresh examples. At this point, as I mentioned about Israel is the leading country in regards to vaccinations, and we'll talk a little bit about that because it relates to some of also the opportunities and challenges that the digital health world is providing us. So, when people tell me what is digital health, the first thing that you want to know is you ask different people and they give you a different perspective about what is digital health. I went and looked online to see what are the two common descriptions of that. One is taken from the FDA. You can see that that is basically the broad scope of digital health, and it includes mobile health, health information, wearable devices, telehealth, telemedicine, and of course personalized medications or personalized medicine. If you go to Wikipedia, you see a little bit more dive into it, which is quite similar. But basically, you see that it's everything that is expected to support, enhance, and improve the efficiency of healthcare, and it relates to everything that healthcare has to offer. It's treatment, it's medication. You hear words like telehealth and telemedication and things like that. I will refer to them. But basically, it's the overall. It's not just what happens on the computer, it's what happens all around us in regards to health. And this is very important because it's much wider than what many people think about. So what falls under digital health, basically, when we talk about that? So as you can see, this is a short list, but the key aspects that fall into digital health. One thing is we talk about AI, artificial intelligence in medicine, which is a very important aspect. AR, which is augmented reality, everything that relates to how we use the reality and basically technology to visualize and see things in an improved way while we do it. Sensors and trackers, everything that tracks us. Nanotech, which is nanotech is a very, very advanced word, but basically everything that relates also to minimizing and miniaturizing technology that is used today. Personalized medicines. This is also very, very important. It's not just about the pill, but it's how do we target the relevant pills. And if I take you to a whole different industry and something that you might relate to, let's talk about cosmetics for a second. So cosmetics, right now there's a lot of trend in the cosmetic world, which goes to places where, based on your skin type, based on your skin care and things like that, you are basically given the relevant type of cosmetic treatment and the relevant type of cosmetic materials that are good for your skin and are helpful for your skin. So basically, and we see it all around. And the same thing with personalized medications. We need to find how we do the right treatment and medication to the right patient. Not every patient is similar, not in the genetic form, not in the physical structure, and the other aspects. The other point is everything that relates to diagnostics. And the two last things, which not always people come into their mind when you talk about digital health, one is robotics. And into robotics, I'm also taking everything that goes into autonomous treatments and treatments that are being done by robots. And printing, the ability to print either a designated device or printing prostheses and other treatments that will be helpful. One of the visions that I'm talking about in the pharmaceutical industry, for example, is the ability to have a printer at home and print your own medication. That you will go, you will have a prescription, and the prescription will be printed on your own medication. This is a very long-term vision, but I can tell you there are companies that are working on that aspect today. And when we talk about generics, this is exactly one of those things that you will be able to print your own generic version of a pharmaceutical product at home with relevant components being sent to you. So for example, if you are a chronically treated patient, you will have all the relevant ingredients you need sent to your home. You will put them in the printer and you will be able to print them on a daily basis with the relevant doses, matching your needs. The system will be able to monitor you and they provide you the relevant medication. It sounds like science fiction today, but it's already in the process of being developed. So this is what falls under digital health. And again, this is it's a list, but there are other aspects, but this is the main things. So let's talk a little bit about general trends. What are the general trends that we see when we talk about digital health? First of all, we all know we have COVID-19. COVID-19 was actually a tsunami that took the healthcare ecosystem and pushed it significantly forward. It changed the entire way that the world thought and looked into treating patients, healthcare. It changed everything in the world, of course. You see how we are communicating today and we're doing a summit online, but basically from a healthcare perspective, it gave it the push that it needed. And we're talking about now expecting the market to grow and reach over $200 billion by 2022. And it's a quite significant change from the numbers that were discussed back in 2019 and 2018. One of the other trends is that we see that the solutions are being challenged all the time. We see that people are challenging the traditional solutions of treatment, the traditional solutions of diagnostics, of patient views, and they are going more into the digital area. And there's a whole concept that says maybe medication is not the relevant solution for some of the diseases. Maybe the way that we are treating chronic diseases, for example, should be changed and should be done in a different way. It should be diagnosed differently, should be monitored differently. And we see that in many, many areas. You can see that in diabetes, for example, the way that the sugar levels are being monitored. You can see how how the treatments are being dosed to the patients, and of course provided to them. Healthcare industry in general is the late bloomer in that aspect, and it relates to my first point about the tsunami and the push. A lot of the industries that we know today have been disrupted throughout the years and during the 21st century. Of course, it started in the 20th century, but the healthcare industry was always lagging behind. It was lagging behind. We started to see the increase happening in the 21st century, especially from 2010 onwards. But again, the COVID-19 really gave it that push based on the necessity that is going to be relevant for us for many years going forward. One of the things that we see is also the focus on drug development. As I mentioned, digital health, a lot of people, when we talk about digital health, they say, yeah, it's the ability to monitor your activities. It's like the Apple Watch. Sorry, I'm usually wearing it, but this is what happens when you're at home and you put it aside. But, monitoring it on your mobile phone, everything that's related to the activities. But basically, we are now talking about not just that, but how do we develop drugs and how do we provide an overall solution for diseases with digital health. And we see it in the way that we develop biosimilars today. We see it with, as I mentioned earlier, targeted medicines. How do we identify, we monitor the activities of people, we identify their needs, and we provide them with the relevant dosage and with a relevant medicine to treat their specific condition. It's not just the disease condition, but it's also all the aspects of their personality and their personal body, which affects the way the disease is affecting them. You could see it with COVID-19. COVID-19, we see that the world is still learning about it, but we see that COVID-19, some of the patients which are affected by COVID-19 have no side effects. For them, it's just a minor cold or a minor flu, while we see others, of course, which have more severe implications up until death. We see different populations, so we know that it affects the elderly, but we see that younger people are also affected. I just read on the news that the two people, 23 and 26 in Israel, yesterday just collapsed and died out of COVID at their home without any prior conditions or anything, and suddenly it happened. So we see there's a lot of variability around it, and this is why we need to identify each and every person's specific design, specific structure, physical structure, and immune system structure to identify what needs to be provided to them. One of the things that we're seeing in the trends is the speeding up of development process. And again, I'm taking the COVID as an example. We see how fast we were able to develop COVID vaccinations. And it's not just about the regulatory aspects that were shortened and everything that is surrounding that, but it's also the ability to harness the technology, to harness digital health, to harness existing technologies, manipulate them, to develop new vaccinations, to test them quickly, to round out the patients, to do the clinical studies. Everything around that was done in a digital way. It's also the ability to learn about a new disease, something that comes out of nowhere, affects the entire world. Now the entire world is joined around this, but the digital health allows us to be quicker on sharing the knowledge, understanding from it, sharing the researches. Think about what we're doing. Within a year, there's a new disease that knocked on our door, a significant plague. And now we're learning about it. We are already vaccinating against it, and we are already understanding how it works and how the vaccine works, and all of this within a period of a year. This is something which is unprecedented. So it's crazy. And it also changes the entire way that approaches for disease treatment are going to be done, again, outside the medication. So it's not just about the medications, but it's also about how do we treat an overall patient with a disease. So this is a little bit just to put something. This is from the Rock Health database, and you can see that basically this is the trend I mentioned already. You see what happens in the beginning of 2011. The investment into digital health platforms from a funding perspective was merely $1.1 billion. This is a US market overview, but you can see how it grew over the years. In H1 2020, we are already seeing a significant increase, and I can tell you that 2020 finished already with almost close to double than 2019. So and this is just the US based. So you can see how the numbers have increased, and also the size of the deals, meaning it's more significant business that goes into that. This is just a quick overview of about 150 digital health companies, and the reason it's here, it's not to show you all the different companies, to talk about each company, but it's to show you the variation between the companies, and to show you everything which is different that goes around digital health. So we can see the pharma supply chain aspects, we can see health plans and benefit management, which is actually for the payers and for the patients. We can see everything that is related to drug discovery, clinical trials, screening and diagnostics. So you can see these are all digital health aspects, and they're really focused on one side as the patients, but also regarding development of treatments and medication. And we can see how all of this goes. And again, this is a short list of that. We'll be diving into a little bit of more of that later on. And these are companies that are changing the way that we receive our medications from a logistic perspective. How do we develop them? How do we treat them? And everything that's related to that. How do we test from a clinical test perspective and things like that. And this is a breakdown of basically you can see how the category is split between the different aspects of health. And you can see that still the majority that is driving is how do we screen and diagnose. This is again digital health realm. The virtual care delivery, which is not as significant as you might expect it. You see it's about 11%. Management and therapeutics is 10%. And clinical intelligence and enablement, the way that we conduct clinical trials, the way that we investigate into medication, you see that is still the most significant driver of digital health today. And that is critical because that's where the companies are focusing on. But I can tell you that some of the things that we see which have a smaller impact today in terms of their share will be growing as the trend goes forward into the 2021, 2022, etc. Drug discovery will grow. And of course, the online, offline care. This is something that you can see will definitely change when we do this remodel in 2021 because of the COVID and because of the way that perspectives are being done. So what are the challenges and what are the opportunities when we come talk about this? So first of all, let's talk about the challenges. The first thing is the public health care system. One of the things that digital health needs is a supporting system. It's a system that is able to support what is needed by the different companies which are developing, but is also able to support the patient and provide the relevant data. We'll talk about the place that data has. I mentioned here, and it's not just because I'm Israeli, but because, again, this is a good example because of the COVID. You see that when you talk about vaccinations, for example, Israel, within a period of 2 months, was able to vaccinate almost all of its relevant population. Relevant means population that is eligible for the vaccination, 16 years and above. We're about 90% in terms of elderly population and over 50% of the rest of the ages. I apologize if you hear some sort of a small screaming. That's my dog, which is in the back. That's one of the things that you do when you're talking from home. So she's crying because she hears me and she's on the outside of the room. She can come in, the door is open.
Not a problem at all.
So yeah, she always does that because she hears my voice. That's part of that's how it works. So basically, so the challenge is the public healthcare system. The ability of Israel to do what it did was because we have a public healthcare system that everybody's part of it, and it enables you to reach the patients quicker or invite them to the different clinics which are in their home cities, and also prepare all the infrastructure to provide the vaccinations and the follow-up on that, which is critical, and also do the researches, and we'll talk about it. So that is one of the challenges that the world is going today. How do we do such public health systems that will be able to support everybody around and help implement everything that is being offered on a digital health perspective and on medications to the entire population? This is one of the key challenges that basically the entire countries around the world are facing and have to cope. Some have better systems, others have less developed systems, and this has to be changed and modified. The other challenge is the support to developers and startups. Now, this is also very, very critical. Support to developers and startups, the ecosystem has to be supported. It has to be supported by funding. It has to be supported by government. It has to be supported by parties that will be able to provide the landscape and provide the infrastructure for these companies to develop, and it's critical to do that. Also, global and local information sharing. I gave that earlier as an example when I spoke about COVID. This is an example of how to do things right. You have to share the information. The faster you go into sharing, the faster you talk about a disease, the faster you talk about solution, you're able to share what you have in the knowledge. This enables you to develop faster and better solutions in a more accurate and correct way. You have to learn. This is knowledge. Everything is based on knowledge. Another aspect, and I'll talk about it also again later, is patient trust and privacy. The challenge here is how do we assure the patients that their privacy is being kept throughout the process. Nobody wants their privacy to be shared with everybody. Nobody wants them to know about their most intimate aspects of their health situation and health diagnostics. And it's critical. And we also have to gain the patients because the patients have to trust. If you look, and I'm going again, taking the COVID example, if you talk about trust, If you look at vaccinations, you see that many people are rising and are basically working against and talking against the vaccination. And I'm not going to talk about aspects regarding that. That's a whole different topic. I can do it. Personally, I got vaccinated as soon as it was relevant for my age category. And I come from a pharmaceutical company in the past, so I know both aspects. But there is a key thing about trust, that patients have to trust that what they are being provided, first what they provide is information, but also what they are being given in terms of data, in terms of what they're being admitted to, everything that is related to their health. They need to trust that it's being done in an open way, in a real way. There are no hidden corners or hidden things, because that will be the key to implementing the digital health technology. And the last thing, which is a challenge, is also rising above the money. When I say rising above the money, look, this is a financial world. We all develop solutions, pharmaceutical companies, it's a business, eventually that's clear. But in healthcare, you have to also look above the money. You have to rise above the money and look at the overall picture. Look about how we are helping humanity, how we are helping people all around the world, and it has to be about rising above the money. It's not an easy change to do. There are a lot of, when I used to work for a pharmaceutical company, one of the things that used to talk about is you can bring a great medication that would be a great solution for patients. But if it's not business viable in terms of the investments you do for development versus the solution, it will not necessarily go into commercial production and go into commercial. And this is one of the things that you have to take into mind. When I talk about opportunities, one of the things that I would like to touch is, first of all, the pace of innovation, and I talked about it. So the pace is going quick. We see that the pace is really accelerating, and it's important. The other thing is funds which are available. Again, this is COVID, but not just the industry today. There's a lot of funds and money that is available for development. The landscape has changed, and again, this is also I'm taking COVID as an example, but this is what it is. The COVID showed us that we have to change. We have to cut the timelines shorter. We have to be more flexible with the development of the approvals. It cannot be 100%. I spoke earlier with Samir about the difference in vaccination rate between, for example, a country like Germany and a country like Israel. So the reason is, sometimes you need to start making adaptations as you move, which is something which is, for example, more Israeli, or you need to plan everything in advance, prepare everything and do it. Now, doesn't mean one approach is different from the other, but you have to be flexible when it cases. So this is part of the thinking. And the patient involvement and collaboration. Today, there is an advantage. The patients are more involved. The patients are more collaborating, and there's a mutual responsibility which is critical between patients and their physicians. Quickly diving into digital health categories, because I look at the time and I see its time is flying. Basically, we're talking about 4 key aspects when it goes to digital health. First of all is telemedicine. The other thing, which is basically the use of everything that is related to communication and transmitting to provide the remote healthcare services. There's mHealth, which is basically mobile technologies, sensors, wearable, everything you can think about, to basically use as a mobile care and medical care and basically support everything that is regarding the patient. The other side of it are 2 things which are critical for the development and for the monitoring. It's the EMRs, the electronic medical records, and IT. How do you collect? How do you store? I mentioned earlier about the public healthcare system in Israel. You have digital records about everybody. So it's easier to target them, make sure that they get the vaccinations, follow up on them, provide the green passport, everything that is related on that. Learn from the diseases. And it's critical. And how do you analyze that data, the AI and health analytics? And it's important because AI is a buzzword, it's a good word, it's machine learning. You cannot do that without the data. I can develop a great AI system for medical. If there's no data behind it to support it, it's useless. And that's one of the key challenges. It has to go hand in hand, the AI and the smart thinking, also with the medical records and the IT that supports it. I saw that there's a question. I will look at that in a second. Telemedication. So let's dive into telemedication. First of all, telemedications made a huge leap in the last decades, okay? And I mentioned again, the COVID-19 basically pushed it even forward. Why? Because there was a need. There was a need for remote healthcare services. You can no longer necessarily go to your doctor. You cannot go to the hospital. You would rather prefer to avoid going there because you don't know what's going on there. And it could lead to a point where you have to find solutions to how do you provide these services, including, by the way, the treatment. So when it came to pharmaceutical drugs, for example, you had to get your prescription, you started getting deliveries of those. So you have to make a system that supports setting the prescription online to the pharmacy and getting a delivery service by that. How do you manage your disease? If you need to measure your vitals, if you need to do some measurements, some indications, how do you do that online? There's the disease management. Disease management is a key thing because this is the overall thing. Again, it's not just about how do we treat, but how do we manage. When you have a chronic disease or when you have a disease that we need to manage it, the telemedicine is not just about getting your specific solution, but it's how do you manage it from end to end. How do you live your life and you manage what you need? So for example, when you have somebody who's a COVID patient, then he has to be he has to be monitored for oxygen saturation. And today you do it, we get a small device, you put it on your finger and you measure it. You don't have to go to the hospital to do it. So this is an example of how you manage it. And then you get the treatments relevant for that. There's an overall treatment, which is not just about the medication. It's about how do you do your health in terms of yoga, treatments. Do you do some exercise at home? Do you go outside? Everything has to be treated. And it's about the people's needs. People need to control their lives and diseases. They want to live with the disease, and they know it's not just about what the doctor says, it's how do you live with it. And today they're also, they're saying, okay, so the doctor told me what I have. I want to learn more about it. I want to understand better. And I want to know what's going on in that aspect. And it's not always as trivial. So this is an important thing. Let me just look at the question. Yes, I would.
Yeah, so there's one question. Yeah.
So I will talk about it towards the end, if that's okay. I saw the question. It's a good question. I have a bit about it. I will talk about it towards the end. So this is a bit about telehealth in terms of the categories that are related to telehealth. And it's important to see because, again, this is something that shows us how the trends are going. You can see that, for example, things like virtual assistants, which were a trend back in 2018, 2019, their role is pretty much quite simple there. We can see that telepharmacy and subscription is still going a little bit low in that aspect, which is kind of a surprise because you would expect that that's one of the things that you would expect to increase. People are still going to daily pharmacies to get their drugs. You still need to get a prescription, and in some countries you have to get a physical prescription from a doctor. You have to go physically to the pharmacy and get it. So that has to be evolved. We do see that everything that is related to telemedicine platforms are being increased. The remote monitoring and diagnostic, and again, next year, which will be the summer of 2020, I mean, this is still not the final summary of 2020, you will see that these percentages are increasing because that's the key. How do we do things from home? And of course, therapy and coaching, which relates to what I mentioned earlier, which is the overall, how do we manage the disease? The other aspect is wearable technology. So wearable technology, what we call mobile health, is basically everything that is wearable and is giving a solution. And you can see that we have monitoring, we have home care, self-treatment, and also how to replace the conventional treatments. On the right is just a short example. You can see a few of the things that we're talking about. So there are optic lenses which you put and are providing you with augmented reality and information. Improve your eyesight in a way. It's not just about regular lenses. You can see audio devices which are improving your hearing but also providing you live information, translation, things like that. Heart monitoring devices, many other things. You have an Apple Watch. The Apple Watch today or any other smartwatch can do probably everything. They can do an ECG, they can monitor your health, do other activities. And they're talking about in the future to monitor sugar levels and other things, which are, everything from a small watch. If you think about the devices that we used to do in the past, of course, blood pressure and other things like that. So it's critical. But, and there's another thing about it, it's not just about that. It's also about home care. If you look about that, it's people think about wearables and home health, mobile health. They think about small devices. They think about what they wear. Sometimes there's also the tendency to think to misplace between sport wearables and medical treatments. Sometimes there's a connection. I mentioned the Apple Watch, but there's also medical devices which are specific medical devices which are wearables. So you have to take those into account. I gave a short example here. One on the right is a machine that enables elderly people to monitor their health from home. It's basically an iPad or a tablet, and you have a camera on it. You can communicate with the doctors, and they have the standard measuring tools. So you can see there's a thermometer, there is the blood pressure unit. You can do everything. It measures, it keeps the records, and it transmits it to the doctor. On the left side, I chose, this is a company, it's called Tyto. This is a company, they provide a device. It's a small device, probably around the size of my hand. And it enables you to conduct a full checkup, heartbeat, hearing the lungs, you can check your throat, you can check your ears, your eyes, you can do everything into that. You see the different adapters. That information is being stored and communicated directly to the doctor who you're talking about on the mobile device. So basically, from home, you're able to do whatever a family doctor does without going there, providing him exactly the same information he will get from that face-to-face meeting, but he gets it online. And that's it. So you're reducing time both for the patient and the doctor, risk of exposure, everything is ready. And it's a smart device, but if you think about it in a way, it's also very, very basic, because it doesn't provide you with the insights. It just collects the information, gives it to the doctor. Next stage will be the ability also to already analyze that information. And I'll talk about that because that's a very, very interesting thing when we talk about analyzing the information and collecting it. Artificial intelligence, and we mentioned that earlier. So when we go to artificial intelligence, machine learning abilities is one of the key things that we need. We need machines that were able to do the learning. We talked about vaccination development, we talked about the research from it. Majority of that part was done for machine learning. We have machines that are able to sit on the data and do a much faster, much more accurate analysis than was done in the past. They can harvest big data and analyze it and provide much better insight. Part of it is also learning what is going on. Patient data is the key, as I mentioned earlier, and that's a must. Health analytic is critical. There's a lot of startup companies today that what they're doing, when you hear about it, it might sound very basic, but it's not. They are able to take, there's a company which basically today takes medical records and takes information from diagnostics of doctors of any other disease, and they collect it. They basically put it in their machine, do a lot of learning, and then they provide you with very smart analytics about what might be the symptoms that you're suffering from. And it's a decision tool that helps the doctors, but also the patients understand what's going on, because they give them similar cases, they give them statistical analysis, things like that. I had a conversation 2 days ago with with a very senior surgeon in Israel, the head of the neurosurgic department in one of the key hospitals in Israel. And he told me that one of the things that hasn't changed throughout the last 50 years is the way that you diagnose the patient in the beginning. When a patient comes to a surgery with, let's say, heart pain, you start talking to them. So you try to understand where the pain comes from, whether it's from the top side of the heart, whether it's the bottom side, left, right, what type of a pain. All these things are critical, but they are critical in order to understand what is the exact problem, where you need to conduct the surgery, if you need to conduct the surgery. And all this process is still being done today in almost every hospital, in the doctor talking to the patient directly and asking the questions. There is no system that is able to collect all that information in advance, analyze it, and already provide what most doctors know, because they are based on the same knowledge. So it's basic, but it hasn't changed. So the landscape for it is very critical. And that goes to my point about providing the insights to the doctor and patients. How do we identify what are the treatments and what needs to be done? And the system is also able to prevent errors, which is very, very good. There's also, as I mentioned,
Erez, I'm very sorry. I know it's a very interesting topic, and you can talk full day on this, I'm pretty sure, and we should listen to you full day, actually. So we are just running a little late now. So if you can wind up in a few minutes so that we can also take a couple of questions before we go to next session. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, I really hate to do this, but no disrespect meant.
No, this is how it works. I mean, we know this is how it works, and that's exactly why you're there, also to help with this. So I'm going to run quickly over the last few slides, and that's it, and I'll leave time for questions. So this is again overall of the AI in the healthcare. You see how many players are there. I wanted to talk about also improvement and monetization of technology. Just give a quick example because we're running out of time. Think about it. Technologies like X-ray hasn't changed since the 19th century, end of the 19th century, when it was developed. We see treatments for cancer, radiology. We see robotics today. People talk about there are surgery robots. These are not surgery robots in the way that they are conducting the surgery. They are basically extending the abilities of the doctor. They are very, very stupid machines. So this is another way that digital health. And the last thing, just to show that, and then we can go to the question, because that's my last slide, is how will it affect generics and biosimilars in development? Faster development, improving the clinical trials, and identifying different diseases in different areas to do that. That's pretty much it.
So I think the first question is how digital would change the diagnostic rate in some key therapy areas post-COVID. That's from Ritu Patel of Sandoz.
Yes, so basically, I think, first of all, I don't have a relevant graph in front of me to share, so I apologize for that. But basically, what we are going to see from 2021 onwards is a significant increase in the rate that we are being able to do these diagnostics in terms of identifying what the patient has in a more exact way will be improved. Now, it will not happen overnight because you have to gather the data. I just mentioned it, that part of this data is still not available in terms of the databases, but there's
you went on mute due to some reason, Erez. Maybe you unmute your microphone on the bottom. So we can't hear you. On the bottom, there are 4 buttons next to your presentation. Maybe you can come out of your presentation first. Oh, it got disconnected. So while he's trying to come back, Michelle Urban has, Erez is back. So the second, go ahead, Erez, please.
Okay, so basically, I think, sorry, my earpiece died, and that's why it disconnected. So basically, I think what we'll see is we will see an increase in the rate. So the time it will take from a patient to have the initial symptoms until you're able to provide a diagnostic will be quicker at much earlier stages. And more importantly, you'll be able to be more accurate on what to identify, not just go around and provide the different options, and online monitoring. Yeah. Yes.
The next question is from Michelle Urban, and I think in summary, what he's saying is that because of telepharmacy, with the products getting delivered at home, the role of the community pharmacy seems to be disappearing. Is it something which you expect, and how will it impact? So I think it's a very broad topic, little bit of challenging topic as well, but your quick comments on that, Erez.
Well, first, I think that's inevitable. I mean, this is what will happen in the future. Pharmacies will no longer be mainly not as we see them today. There will not be a pharmacist that is talking to a patient. You will do everything online, and I think that if you have the right system to support it, and the monitoring system again, this is something that is definitely the future that's going to happen. And I think the risk is always there. You know, even if you talk to a pharmacy, if you go to a pharmacy, sometimes the pharmacist can be somebody who will identify that there's a different problem and not provide you with the medication, knowing that it's a risk. Sometimes they will miss it. So I think part of the ecosystem around the system that we'll be able to monitor is making sure that what you get is exactly the right dosage, exactly the right product. And since the system will have all your data inside, they will also know all the risk factors. So they were able to automatically filter, you have a generic products, but they know that they have experience with some product. They will be able to change it. For example, patients that take statins, for example, even though it's generics, we know that statins from one manufacturer will react differently with a patient based on a generic of the same product from another manufacturer because of the excipients and other things that are in the other materials that are in the drug. So the system will already know how to identify that based on the previous experience and be able to push the more adequate drug.
Okay, thank you, Erez. I think you had a very big challenge in covering such a wide topic in 30 odd minutes, and my congratulations to you. You still managed in about 35, 40 minutes, and it's a very interesting topic. I would only say that we all have been agreeing that pharma industry has been the slowest in adapting artificial intelligence and those kind of technologies. And that's why the importance of digital health and these topics have become more relevant now. And thank you for giving us as much as possible, a deep dive into this topic. And I'm pretty sure we all will be looking forward to hearing more of your thoughts in future. So for the time being, whatever little Hebrew I know, I can only say Shalom, Erez, and thank you very much. And we look forward to meeting you again in some other platform.
Thank you, Samir. It's been a pleasure. I thank you for hosting me, and hopefully we'll meet again in the future and have a good weekend and successful rest of the summit.
Likewise. So if you can disconnect, then I'll go back to the backstage.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Bye.
Bye.